When you first move into a place, the smallest things feel like proof you made the right choice. The mail carrier who whistles as he walks the street, the neighbor who waters her roses at dawn, the old maple that turns the whole block gold in October. I told myself all of that the first week I was here, as if saying it out loud would turn a rented house into a home. Our neighborhood had that rare, ridiculous perfection. Buntings in summer, holiday lights that never looked tacky, people who returned stray dogs by name and baked things for new faces. It was the kind of place where strangers smiled like they owed you money. It was the kind of place advertised in glossy brochures. And then there was Daniel. Daniel lived 3 houses down. He had the neat lawn and the sleepy truck. He worked a 9-to-5 job, or that was the story he told the few neighbors who asked. He was the man with the geometry of comfort, trim sweater, predictable chuckle, a mailbox that always held a paper folded at the exact crease. He brought casseroles to block parties. He fixed the neighbor's leaky gutter and refused payment. He introduced himself at the fence the first weekend I was here, offered a firm handshake, and pronounced the street a rare thing. This is where the trouble begins. People like Daniel are convincing. They move through tiny rituals, grocery runs, dog walks, weekend soccer with the kids, and those rituals add up to trust. They are a grammar of normal. I learned his rhythms without trying. Saturday mornings, he took the recycling out in a navy hoodie. Wednesdays, he jogged with earbuds in a steady pace. He always greeted me by name after the first month as if he'd known me for years. The house next to his had a blue door and a swing on the porch where an elderly woman knitted. She told me, in that gentle, local way, that Daniel was one of the good ones. People nodded when she said it. It sank into the soil of the street, that belief: Daniel is safe, Daniel belongs. Curiosity began as a thing too small to name. It was the way his curtains were almost always closed. It was the box he carried to his car at night, small, careful, with the way someone carries something fragile. It was the way his calendar on the community board filled with dinner invites, but he never accepted more than 1 or 2. Little nothings piled up into a quiet shape. Not suspicious, not yet, just off. You learn to explain away discomfort. I told myself he was private. I told myself curtains meant a person liked their privacy. People have bedrooms and bathrooms and private things. I told myself the box was probably electronics. I told myself my neighborhood was safe and I was looking for danger where none existed. There was also the thing you don't admit to yourself until later. The way he looked at the houses when he walked by. Not a neighbor's glance, something longer, almost reading the seams. I noticed it once when I leaned on my windowsill making coffee. He was 3 houses down, pausing at the curb as if comparing roof lines. His head tilt was casual, but his eyes tracked each window like someone checking for answers. I laughed it off. I told myself I was new and suspicious and silly. Oddities accumulated at the edges of days. A package left on his stupid midnight and gone by dawn. The late-night car that left and returned 3 nights in a row. The gardening tools he never used. Small things like insects drawn to a single lamp. Each anomaly alone was forgivable. Together they made a quiet pattern I could not yet name. Our block had rules we obeyed unconsciously. We trimmed hedges on Thursdays. We exchanged sugar and gossip on porches. It was polite to be neighborly and awkward to pry, so when those small alarms rose in my chest, I kept them contained. I watched him, not openly. I watched through the ordinary acts of living. I checked the day he moved his recycling bin in a different spot, or when he wore gloves in July. I tried to write it all off with calm reasons. Work demands, strange hobbies, eccentricities. I was rational, or at least I wanted to be. But the seed had been planted. The smile that once seemed sincere now had enough shadow beneath it to cast doubt. The street remained beautiful at dusk. Lamps flickered on, kids played, the maple threw its dying light across the pavement. I would sit on my porch and let the evening calm settle in, and a new thought would creep like a cold thread. How little we know about the people who live closest to us. If you live in a place that looks safe, you think safety is a fact. You learn the rhythms and call them proof. You assume routine is honesty. That faith is powerful. It makes it possible to sleep with your windows open and to hand your neighbor a casserole without looking him in the eyes. I kept handing the casserole. I kept smiling back. I kept believing, at least loudly enough for myself, that my town had no teeth. But trust, like thin glass, can hold for a long time and then shatter without warning. The first cracks are subtle. They begin as small noises you tell yourself are nothing.
They begin with a man named Daniel who loved the block enough to live on it and loved his privacy enough to close the curtains. I thought that was the worst of it. I was wrong.
It's strange how suspicion doesn't arrive like a thunderclap. It slips in quietly, like a draft through a misaligned window, just cool enough to make you aware something in the room has changed. For me, that draft came on a Tuesday night. I was sitting at my desk, finishing some late work, when I heard a faint sound drifting through the open window, something between a hum and a murmur. At first, I thought it was someone walking their dog while talking on the phone, but the voice, it didn't rise and fall like a normal conversation. It stayed low. The sound came from Daniel's side yard. When I leaned closer to the window, the murmuring stopped instantly, cut off like someone had pressed mute. That was the first moment I felt watched. Not seen, watched. But I told myself it was nothing, just a coincidence. Maybe he heard me moving and went quiet. Still, the hair on the back of my neck didn't settle for almost an hour. Things escalated slowly after that. The next oddity happened on a morning run. I jogged past Daniel's house around 6 a.m., just as the sun was starting to push pale light across the roofs. His curtains were closed as usual, but something else caught my eye. The front door was cracked open. Not enough to enter, not enough to seem intentional, just a 2-inch invitation into darkness. I slowed, listening. Silence. No footsteps, no movement, no voices. Just that tiny wedge of shadow slicing down the middle of a perfectly normal house. I debated calling out to him, but something about the stillness made my chest tighten. Instead, I kept jogging, telling myself I'd misjudged the angle, that maybe the door was just slightly ajar from the breeze. When I looped back 10 minutes later, the door was shut. Completely. And yet no one had come outside. People in our neighborhood were predictable, almost comically so. Mrs. Weaver trimmed her roses every Sunday. The Hendersons walked their golden retriever after dinner. Even the teenagers had a reliable pattern of skateboarding past the park at sunset. But Daniel, his life began to stutter in strange ways. 2 Mondays in a row, his car never moved, yet he'd claimed he had an office job downtown. 3 nights, the light in his basement flickered on at 2:13 a.m. Every Wednesday, a delivery truck stopped at his house, even though no package ever appeared on the porch afterward. I reminded myself, people have their own lives. Not everything needs to make sense to you. But when you see oddity after oddity, denial gets harder. Especially when you add the feeling of being watched. One evening, I stepped out to take the trash to the curb. When I lifted the bin lid, I felt it again. That prickling awareness on the back of my spine, like a presence was studying me with quiet patience. I turned. Daniel's living room window, curtains drawn every single night, had a slight dip where the fabric didn't fully meet. A gap no bigger than a coin. But behind that gap, something shifted. A shadow, a silhouette, the faintest outline of a face. For a fraction of a second, I met it, whatever it was. Not long enough to catch details, just long enough to know it had been there already, watching before I looked. I froze, trash bag dangling from my hand. The shadow didn't move, didn't shrink back, didn't pretend to hide. It simply remained. I walked back inside without turning my back fully, and the sound of the deadbolt sliding into place felt louder than it should have. I told myself a dozen excuses. Maybe he heard me. Maybe he was curious. Maybe he was just standing there and I'd misinterpreted. Neighbors stares sometimes. That's normal, right? But human intuition is an old thing, older than the houses we live in, older than neighborhood etiquette. It knows when we're not alone. It knows when someone's attention lingers too long. And mine kept saying one thing: something is not right inside that house. The final trigger of segment 2 happened late on a Friday night. I had stepped into my backyard to lock the shed
when I heard a soft, metallic clink from the fence line. On Daniel's side, I turned my head, expecting to see a branch fall or maybe a raccoon. Instead, I saw it. A hand, a human hand, wrapped over the top slat of the fence, motionless, pale, perfectly still, not reaching for anything, not bracing for balance, just resting there, as if whoever it belonged to was listening, waiting. My breath froze in my chest. Then, slowly, the hand slid back down the other side of the fence, vanishing without a single footstep or rustle. I stood there for a full minute, heart pounding, waiting to hear something, anything that would confirm that it was a mistake. But the world remained quiet, too quiet. I didn't sleep that night, not because I was frightened. Fear hadn't fully formed yet. It was something worse. Uncertainty that grew teeth. Uncertainty that crawled under doors and pressed its ear to walls. Uncertainty that whispered, "You're not imagining it. Something is happening next door." And soon, I'd have no choice but to face it.
It happened on a night that should have been ordinary. A quiet, chilly Thursday, the kind where the whole block felt like it was holding its breath. I remember sitting on the couch with the TV on low volume, half watching some documentary just to make the house feel less empty. Outside, the streetlights hummed faintly, and the neighborhood dogs had long fallen silent. Around 11:40 p.m., I heard something from Daniel's house. Not the murmurings, not the soft footsteps or the low thud of something shifting in the basement. This was different. A sharp, brittle sound, like glass shattering. I stood up instantly. For a moment, I just listened. My heart was pounding with that mix of fear and adrenaline you get when something finally breaks the pattern you've been trying so hard to ignore. Another sound followed, a short, ragged noise. Not quite a cry, more like a gasp. I moved to my window and looked out across the dim street. Daniel's house was still dark, every curtain drawn tight. Nothing looked out of place, except the basement window. It wasn't dark anymore. A faint, flickering glow pulsed behind the glass, like a candle struggling to stay alive. I saw movement too, a thin shadow swaying back and forth. And then something else. Not movement, light. A thin, trembling beam, like someone waving a small flashlight, unmistakably coming from inside the basement. A signal, a warning, a plea. My chest tightened. I grabbed my phone, hesitating as my thumb hovered over the screen. Call the police? Call Daniel? Do nothing and pretend I didn't see it? All the strange moments of the past weeks. The watching, the whispers, the cracked door rushed back like a reel of film played too fast. And for the first time, they all felt like pieces of the same puzzle. The light flickered rapidly now, almost desperate. I stepped outside. The cold air slapped my face as if begging me to turn back, but something stronger pulled me forward. Curiosity, fear, responsibility? I couldn't name it. I only knew I was moving. As I walked across the street, the silence was so heavy, it felt like it had weight. Not a single house had a light on. Not a single car passed. Even the insects seemed to have gone still. Daniel's front yard looked the same as always. Clean, empty, familiar. But the closer I got, the more wrong it felt. The mailbox flag was up. The porch light, never turned on at night, glowed weakly. And the front door? It was unlocked. Not open, not cracked, just unlocked. I knew because when I placed my hand on the knob, it turned effortlessly. I should have left. I should have turned back. Every instinct in my body screamed at me to walk away. But that trembling beam of light from the basement window kept replaying in my mind. Someone was down there. Someone who needed help. I pushed the door open an inch. The smell hit first. A heavy, metallic scent, cold, wet, and unnatural. It clung to the air like a fog. My stomach tightened immediately, and I had to swallow twice to steady myself. The house was silent, too silent. I stepped inside. The living room was exactly how I expected. Tidy, symmetrical, unnervingly perfect. A blanket folded with military precision. Books aligned like they'd never been touched.
every object positioned as if placed by a ruler. No sign of a struggle, no broken glass, no damage, except for one thing out of place. A trail of faint, wet footprints on the hardwood floor leading towards the basement door. I stared at them for a long moment. They were small, almost child-sized, bare and smeared as though whoever made them had been dragging their feet. Each step darker than the last. The basement door was slightly open, and a sliver of darkness dripped through the gap like ink. My hands shook as I grabbed the nearest object, a lamp from the side table, holding it like a weapon. Ridiculous, but comforting. I pushed the basement door wider. A cold draft spilled out, washing over my skin like an unwelcome hand. It smelled stronger down there, metallic, damp. It had a thickness that stuck to the back of my throat. And then I heard it, breathing, slow, uneven, coming from the bottom of the stairs. I raised my phone's flashlight, the beam cutting through the blackness. The stairs creaked under my feet as I descended, each step amplifying my pulse until it drowned out everything else. Halfway down, I saw something I'll never forget, a figure standing in the middle of the basement. Small, thin, facing the corner with their head bowed. A child? No, not a child. Not anymore. Before I can make sense of what I was seeing, the figure slowly turned towards me, little by little, like something that had forgotten how humans move. And that was the exact moment, the precise second, when my entire perception of my neighbor shattered. Everything the neighborhood believed about Daniel, everything I believed about Daniel, collapsed like a lie finally exposed.
Because when that figure turned fully around, I realized it wasn't alone. There were other shapes in the basement, watching, listening, waiting, and all of them had one thing in common. They weren't supposed to be here. They weren't supposed to exist at all. That was the moment I understood. Daniel's secret wasn't just disturbing. It was something far, far worse. I didn't breathe for several seconds. Not because I forgot, but because my body refused to. My mind couldn't process what I was seeing. The beam of my phone's flashlight trembled violently, wobbling across the basement floor, skimming over scattered objects, then landing on the figure closest to me. Their eyes were wide, glassy, unfocused, like they were staring through me rather than at me. The skin on their face was pale and stretched too tightly over the cheekbones, as if something underneath had hollowed them out. Their hair hung in uneven clumps, some strands cut short, some left long, as though someone had trimmed it without care or reason. But that wasn't the worst part. The worst part was the silence. There were at least 4, maybe 5 figures in that basement, all standing in different corners, all watching with the same dead, empty stillness, but not one of them made a sound. Not a shuffle, not a breath, not even a tremor. They looked alive, but they didn't act alive. I stepped back instinctively, my heel hitting the bottom stair. The basement was freezing, far colder than any room should naturally be. I exhaled, watching a thin stream of vapor drift in front of me. Somewhere above, the house creaked as if shifting under its own weight. My voice crawled out, barely audible. "Hello?" One of the figures twitched. Just a tiny movement, like a muscle spasm, but enough to send a bolt of cold panic up my spine. I gripped the lamp tighter in my hand. I should have run. I should have bolted up those stairs and out the door without looking back. But the room forced my eyes towards something else. Something near the center of the basement. Something arranged carefully, deliberately. A wooden table. Stains covered its surface, dark, irregular, some old, some fresh. Tools were lined up beside it. Not medical tools, not household tools, things that didn't belong together. Scissors, rope, pliers, razors, and a cracked mirror smeared with fingerprints. And on the far wall,
illuminated faintly by the wavering glow from a single bulb, I saw pictures, dozens of them, photographs, pinned in neat rows. At first, I couldn't understand what I was looking at. The images were blurry, taken from odd angles. Shadows obscured faces. Some were taken through windows, others through blinds, others still from behind bushes or fences. Then I saw one I recognized. My front porch. The date scribbled under it was from a week after I moved in. I scanned the wall, my heartbeat slamming against my ribs. More photos, more dates, more recognizable places. My backyard, my driveway, my bedroom window. And then, the final punch of realization. A photo taken through my living room curtains. Me, sitting on the couch, unaware, exposed. My throat closed completely. For a moment, my body simply refused to move. My mind churned, desperate to latch on to a logical explanation, but there was none. There was no reason for these photographs to exist, no reason for these figures to be here, no reason for any of this to be inside the home of a man who waved at neighbors and volunteered to fix gutters. Behind me, a soft sound broke the silence. A footstep. Slow, steady. I turned my head, expecting for someone I knew, someone normal, someone who could explain this nightmare. Instead, standing halfway down the basement stairs was Daniel, but not the Daniel I knew. Not the tidy, soft-spoken man who handed out casseroles and mowed his lawn in clean lines. This Daniel looked hollow. His eyes were sunken, ringed with exhaustion. His shirt was stained with something dark. He stared at me with an expression I couldn't read. Part shock, part irritation, part something that looked disturbingly like disappointment. For a long, paralyzed moment, neither of us spoke. Then he exhaled slowly, his voice calm in a way that made my stomach twist. "You weren't supposed to see this." My grip tightened on the lamp. The figures behind me shifted again, subtle movements, but now unmistakable. As if my presence had disrupted some unspoken order in the room, I didn't dare turn around. Daniel took one more step down. He wasn't holding a weapon. He wasn't rushing at me. He wasn't threatening me. But his stillness, his calmness, his acceptance of this twisted room, that was worse than any weapon. He looked at the figures, then at the tools, then at the wall of photographs, including the ones of me. "This is complicated," he murmured. "You'll understand eventually." Understand what? What was there to understand about this basement full of silent, emaciated figures and a wall of surveillance photos? I stepped backward, inch by inch, ready to turn and sprint, but his voice stopped me cold. "Don't leave." Soft, pleasant. The same tone he used when offering me banana bread at a black party. I felt something shift in the basement. Behind me, a collective, almost imperceptible inhale from the figures, like they were waiting for his instruction. Daniel tilted his head slightly. "You're part of this now." I bolted. I sprinted up the stairs so fast I stumbled, slamming my shoulder against the wall, nearly dropping the lamp. Behind me, I heard movement, slow at first, then faster, like the room itself had woken up. I didn't look back. I didn't want to know how close they were. I didn't want to know which ones were moving. I threw myself through the doorway, slammed the basement door, and ran into the night without stopping to lock anything behind me. As I fled across the street, lungs burning, I realized something horrific. Those figures, those pale, silent figures, weren't strangers. At least two of them I had seen before. Not in the basement, not in the house, but on my street, walking, quietly, smiling, passing by like normal neighbors. And now I finally understood the truth. Not everyone on our block was who they claimed to be. Some of them belonged to him. Some of them were his. And none of us had ever truly been safe.
I sprinted all the way back to my house, slammed the door behind me, and locked every latch, every bolt, every chain. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely turn the key. For a moment, I leaned my back against the door, listening, waiting for footsteps, a voice, anything. But the neighborhood was silent, the kind of silence that doesn't happen naturally, the kind that feels arranged. I pulled the curtains shut, turned off all the lights, and sat on the floor with my back to the wall. I tried calling the police, but my mind was a mess. My voice cracked. My explanation made no sense even to me. How do you tell someone your neighbor has pale, silent people in his basement who move like broken marionettes? How do you explain a wall of photos documenting your life without sounding unhinged? They said they'd send someone. They didn't say when. Minutes passed, or maybe hours, I couldn't tell. Every sound made me flinch. A creaking pipe, a gust of wind against the window, my own heartbeat pounding too loudly. Eventually, I forced myself to peek outside through a tiny slit in the curtain. Daniel's house was dark again. Still, normal, too normal. No police cars, no flashing lights, no movement. It was as if the house had swallowed the truth whole. I didn't sleep that night, or the night after. When the police finally did come, after several follow-up calls and a lot of vague promises, they knocked on Daniel's door, waited, knocked again, and left. After 5 minutes, they said there was no sign of anything suspicious, no visible disturbance, no forced entry, no evidence. They didn't check the basement. They didn't see the photos. They didn't meet the figures. They only saw the front of the mask. The perfect, gentle neighbor everyone trusted. A week later, Daniel's car disappeared from the driveway. A neighbor said he'd mentioned visiting family for a while. Someone else said he took a temporary job out of town. Rumors spread, but no one knew for sure. All I knew was this: he left, and he didn't leave alone. Late one night, I watched from my upstairs window as silhouettes moved quietly beside his car, thin shapes slipping into the back seat as if they'd been instructed not to make a sound. The streetlights flickered, the engine hummed softly, and then they were gone. Life returned to normal the next morning. Kids played outside again, neighbors watered their plants, people waved politely at each other. But I couldn't shake the feeling that things had changed. Not the neighborhood, me. I started locking the windows, even in daylight. I bought heavy curtains that no one could see through. I installed cameras, motion lights, alarms, everything. But paranoia doesn't disappear. It adapts. It grows sharper, because once you've seen what hides behind a friendly smile, once you've stepped inside the house everyone trusts but nobody truly knows, you realize there are some secrets you're never supposed to uncover. And you start to wonder, what do I truly know about the people who live around me? What's happening behind their fences, under their floors, behind their closed doors? Who's watching me right now from a window I can't see? And worst of all, if Daniel's basement wasn't the only one. I never saw him again, but some nights, when the street is quiet and the house settles just right, I swear I still hear that faint, uneven breathing coming from somewhere close. Maybe next door, maybe the alley, maybe much, much closer. Whatever he did, whoever those figures were, it didn't end in that basement. It started there. And I don't think I've seen the last of it. If you've listened all the way to the end, thank you. Don't forget to like the video,
and subscribe to the channel. Your one click motivates me to write the next story. Sleep Stealer, signing off.